CEO didn't understand what my department did apparently. Some backstory. I was a general troubleshooter for my company. My job involved a lot of traveling to different clients we support. My area of work is Ontario, Canada, where I'm based out of, and some of the nearby states in the United States, New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, Pennsylvania. I did most of my traveling by car since my schedule can change quite quickly, and flying can become very expensive. I had one colleague who is technically my subordinate, but we have a very good working relationship and would often handle calls independently of each other, only checking in by phone once a week and in person once a month, when necessary. A little over a year ago, I get an email calling me to the head office in New York City for a meeting with the CEO and a board of directors regarding my job. I check with my colleague and he got the same email. So we make our travel plans and meet in New York City the following week. We have dinner together the night before our meeting and can't figure out between us what the issue is about. It's rare to get summoned to the head office and more rare for things to be so vague. When we go into the meeting the next day, we are informed that the company is dividing our department between the US and Canada, and that there will be a new person to deal with the US clients, and we were to restrict ourselves to Canada. Both my colleague and I were a little shocked at this, since neither of us had even heard this was being discussed. I asked who the new person for the US was, and we then learned that it was a new hire that the CEO had taken a special interest in. Trying to be of good spirit, I offered to train the new person. There are many realities of the job that are not in the job description. CEO accepted and then brought in the new hire. In walks a young lady who looks about 23 years old and wears an expression that she knows everything. She sits at the table and immediately makes it very clear that she wants nothing to do with us. CEO Bob, new hire Karen, my colleague Jim. Welcome, Karen. We have just informed OP and Jim about changing the structure and that they are willing to give you the support you need to get yourself started. Karen and Bob both look at me. Glad to have you aboard, Karen. I think both Jim and I have a lot of experience to share with you, and we're happy to do so. Perhaps it would be better in a separate meeting so we don't take the board's time.
Thank you all. I have a lot of ideas how I can streamline our department and new policies I can introduce that should save the company a lot of money and expenses.
I'm very confused at this point. Karen is speaking as though she is my supervisor, and that is distinctly not what Bob spoke to us about. I can see some of the board members giving strange looks at this as well. Bob, perhaps I misunderstood the new roles here. Would you please clarify?
Sure, Karen is the new head of your department and both you and Jim will answer directly to her.
This isn't what we discussed or approved as a board. We weren't fully convinced of dividing the department, but this is completely against what we discussed.
What did you discuss then?
That your department would be divided between the US and Canada. Opie and Jim would remain north of the border and you would run the US.
That's not what I was told, but I can work with that as long as these two stay out of my way,
indicating me and Jim. Jim and I are both shocked and insulted to be spoken of in this matter. We are both very good at our jobs and before today have never seen this woman in our lives.
That settles it. OP effective immediately. You and Jim have nothing to do with Karen. Do not interfere with her work at all. You are both to restrict yourselves to working with Canada only.
With that, he ended the meeting and left the room with Karen close behind him. Jim and I sat there stunned for a moment, and some of the board members came up to us to express their shock and sympathies about this. I had enough presence of mind to ask if we would get a written directive of this change and was assured we would. Sure enough, both Jim and I got emails with the new directives from Bob by the end of the day. So after sending an email to all our US-based clients advising them of the change and giving them the contact information of Karen, Jim and I made our way back to Toronto and reorganized ourselves for working with Ontario only. This meant much less traveling for us, so it gave us more room to breathe. Within a week, I was getting complaints from our US-based clients that Karen was not answering emails and was missing appointments. I forwarded these emails to Karen and copied the entire board, including Bob. Another week later, I get a phone call from Karen, who sounds frantic, but will not admit she needs help. She makes pleasant conversation and then asks how I would handle a particular type of situation. I tell her I'm really not interested in discussing work as it might be seen as interfering with her work. Later that evening, I get a call from Jim telling me that he had the same conversation with Karen and handled it the same way. By the end of the month, I get a call from Bob asking if we will take over the entire department again. I politely tell him no, since I didn't want to interfere with Karen and her role. For the next 3 months, I'm getting emails and phone calls from the US clients asking if they can have me back as their contact. This confirms an idea that had been in my head. Jim and I had actually grown our clients base in Ontario since restricting ourselves here. So I had a lunch with Jim one day and asked him if he wanted to get into business with me as partners, starting our own consulting firm. We couldn't provide everything our current company provided, but we could provide a high degree of professionalism for our specific field, and it seemed we had really made a client base. By the end of the lunch, he was on board and we started the necessary steps to get ourselves set up. As soon as we were clear, we both submitted our resignations with explanations of why. The next time clients contacted us, we told them that we no longer worked for the company. When they asked if we would still work in the field, we told them we had established our own firm and what services we offered. A month later, we had 60% of our US clients on board, and since the former company had no Canadian support at all, we had 80% of the Canadian clients. Within 2 months, we had 80% of the US and 90% of the Canadian clients. In the years since that time, our new company has grown enough that we had hired 7 new consultants. Jim and I find ourselves doing more office work than road work, and a lot of our client courting. Our old company has had to stop offering the in-person troubleshooting, what our department did, and Bob was fired by the board. No idea what happened to Karen, though. Wow, so that's like another one of these in Malicious Compliance in less than a week, and I love it. I love seeing this happen to companies that get too big for their britches. In this particular case, the CEO literally had no idea what these guys did and wanted to entrust this young blood to try to come in and do their job pretty much for them without any prior training or anything. And his initial plan was to have her take the whole thing over, and she had no idea what she was doing. And I feel as though maybe this particular decision was fueled by something else. For those of you who weren't following along with that, I have a little excerpt from Mario to explain.
Well, you see, Luigi, when a paisano puts a spaghetti noodle in a Mamma Mia's ravioli, a little bambino covered in prosciutto comes out about 9 months later.
Karen got what she deserved, the boss got what he deserved, and the people who got out of this smelling like roses got exactly what they deserve, and I love it. I wanted to know, I kind of want to know what the company went after this, after they literally took almost all of their clients. What's left for that company? Who cares? Don't build a project? Enjoy doing my work then. I work as an engineer, but I wear many hats, including dealing with billing the client. We bill our time to the projects we work on. My current project was coming to an end in May. This all started in April, and I'm slated to start a new one in June. Now my project manager receives a bonus for his job completion that is directly tied to the profits made on the job. So it is in his best interest to remove excess staff from the job early so they are not draining anything from the remaining funds in the budget. Anything left over from the staffing budget goes to the profit pool. It is somewhat important for me to mention that this project is located 10 minutes away from my house, but the new one is 2 hours away. So I asked my manager to keep me on for a month longer so I had time to vacate my current apartment and move to my new one. At the time, he said sure, no problem. And to my dismay, behind my back, he transferred me off a week after my request. I didn't even hear from him. I heard from my new project manager. I was confused and upset, and I decided that while I wouldn't confront him, I certainly wasn't going to make his life any easier. One of my remaining tasks was to bill the client for the final month. Not a difficult task, but submission is through the client's online portal, which is an antiquated and confusing system to work with. On top of that, the client is a real stickler about making sure the process is correct and that we won't miss the deadlines. There are draft submissions, review meetings, and final submissions to worry about, and each step has its own deadlines. Additionally, we have consultants that need to be paid for April's work. I emailed him and asked who was going to take over this task. I explained to him that it was a lot of work and that I just probably stick around for the last week or two more to show him the process. His response was exactly as I expected. It's just billing. It's not rocket science. I don't need your help, etc. So to start my malicious compliance, I did exactly what he said. I left it all alone, forwarded every email related to the project to the manager, and waited patiently for the ramifications to kick in. 2 weeks into May, I started getting CC'd on nasty emails from 3 sides. The client, who was getting frustrated that the project manager wasn't following the process correctly and had missed multiple deadlines, the consultants who hadn't received their pay, and upper management, who didn't understand why after 3 years of everything running smoothly, they were now receiving threatening emails and calls from the consultants. I got called in by the regional vice president asking why I hadn't properly prepped my manager on the process. Turns out that when the VP questioned my manager, he had blamed me. So I showed him the email where I offered to teach him and he rejected. VP called my manager and chewed him out right there, and then asked why he couldn't hold on to me for a month more. It wouldn't have even been that big of a cost to the project. After that, VP asked me to step back in to fix the issue before the end of May. I told him I could do it, but I definitely have to work overtime to make it happen. I got blanket approval for it and worked overtime all week, plus weekends, and I could expense my mileage to go to the meetings. I racked up 30 extra hours at 1.5 times the pay and 40 weekend hours at 2 times the pay on top of my regular 40 hours per week. I found out today that part of the overtime will be docked from my manager's bonus. So, in his quest to earn a tiny more in his bonus from removing me from the project, he ended up losing a shit ton more. Just because by word of mouth it sounds like an easy job doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an easy job. The client that they were working with clearly had a very particular set of ways they wanted things to be done. You think you know everything? Fine, you know everything, but you get what you deserve at the end. This is one of those situations where someone was trying to be cheap and they got exactly what they paid for. And unfortunately, in the end, this one ended up costing the guy some money. And that's alright, because our hero, the OP in this one, got a whole bunch of money out of it. Though he had to work like double time in order to get stuff done. So I do feel bad for him, because that could have been completely avoided had the original manager not been such a dick. So those are my opinions on these stories. Please tell me yours in the comment section below. I love them. Yes, they were pretty long, weren't they? But I want to know what your opinions are, and I always look in the comment section, and I always respond to as many as I possibly can, and I look forward to your comments. And if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and ring that little bell icon, and also maybe drop a like. I don't know, if you're feeling it, you know? So thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you much for following along. As usual, as always, my friends, stay frosty and keep moving forward. Yeah.